One of the things that I've read about, it's this book right here that my mom got me. It was done in 1971.
I think my brother had that book.
One of the things it says in here is Daniel, he would steal horses. And it didn't mean anything to him at all. It was just like chasing the horses in the fields. Nobody owned the horses. We're talking about fragmentation in terms of people. The rest of nature, the rest of the universe does not fragment. That's why we would talk about fragmentation. And then in relationship to consciousness. And so you can envision what happens to consciousness when there's an impact for a human being.
Fragmentation implies there's a lack of unity.
Well, when I think of fragmentation, I think of the windshield of the car when it will break completely. We've made the bottles so that they'll fragment when we drop one in the kitchen, but it doesn't fall to pieces and make a mess. People go around a lot like a fragmented windshield or a fragmented bottle, but they look like they're all together.
How does one know if there is fragmentation in oneself or in the wholeness of another?
It's hard to know unless you know what it's like not to be fragmented.
And so from your perception, if you could describe a lack of fragmentation, what would that be?
Those moments when we feel free, we feel happy, there's nothing in our way. A young person is not as fragmented as an older person, usually, and especially a baby who, you know that all babies wiggle their toes. Why do they wiggle their toes? Because they're free and they're experiencing that immense consciousness without fragmentation. But we wiggle our toes less and less really quickly because we then begin to have to play according to what fragmentation is to separate ourselves from what's really true and live according to, well, how would it feel if you know what I mean? For those who are able to feel their toes. We can be so far away from feeling our toes wiggle or knowing that we have toes to wiggle. But there's a lot of people who would giggle if they could wiggle their toes. And they would really wiggle when they started to giggle because it's such a wonderful feeling to have. Being alive now is really alive, and it doesn't go away because fear changes its formation of how we regulate ourselves in terms of it. The fear is a sensation about being close to the edge, and it's important to know. So you adjust so there's nothing wrong with walking on the edge and being there where you could fall, but you never do because you're so aware. There's where awareness comes in. Awareness happens because we're not afraid of fear. But as long as we're afraid of that sensation we have in our amygdala emotionally, fear is an emotion. And as long as we're afraid of that emotion, we never really exercise our relativity in relationship to being, well, wiggling our toes again.
And then, if we relate that to the mind and the brain and the body and its connection, where is fragmentation occurring? And how do I, as an individual that would assess my ability to fragment or understand a degree of fragmentation in me, how would I become aware of such a state of being?
We would stop and catch ourselves as a thought begins to take place that has nothing to do with what's going on. And then, of course, we get carried away with and no longer pay attention to what's taking place. So that would be, we ask a question again about what's going on. I want to refresh myself and test the water another time. Tell me about what's happening. Tell me about how you feel. Tell me about what it looks like, because I want to see through your eyes. I want to feel through your fingers. I want to feel through all of your feelings, whoever you are.
Isn't that the truth? It comes down to the relationship with one another in that moment.
In the moment, there is no thought. And if you live in the moment, no thought ever grows. It's there, but then there's the moment again, which fills you completely. And there's no room for thought because you start to become so aware of this is amazing. And the way to be a part of what's taking place is to pay attention. That otherwise I would have an accident. I'd have a boo-boo. And it gets kind of a lot of fun, the game. The between the boo-boo and what's taking place. We can create boo-boos if we think and don't pay attention. we can be very much out of tune.
There's a volley that takes place. And so our fragmentation potentially is the ability to allow your mind, brain, body, spirit, its potential to fully embody so that it can just be within the environment. There's no intending. I don't need to tell myself how to respond to the environment. I can trust and accept that my body will initiate its own response organically based upon the need of its own intelligence.
Yeah, I can see where we would advance to the point where we can get back into fragmentation, but not be fragmented. Swim in the fragmentation. There's no reason we couldn't. As we get better at realizing it before it gets a hold of us and takes balance away, we can coordinate in relationship to as many ways as things can go, even as unexpected as they are. Whatever fragment gets thrown out or pulled out or falls out, and then everything falls to pieces. But we don't.
It reminds me of David Bohm saying there's this folding and enfolding. Mm-hmm. And really it's this beautiful relationship with allowing the newness. And so therefore, if we want to hold on to what just went, that is no longer, but if I attempt to hold on to that, now I become fragmented because I must, I must drop an element of a whole in that moment to follow something that is historically past in my mind. So I'm not going to let that go. I got to think about it so I'll know what to. I mean, it's this following.
So I think we can have with the fragmentation the ability to glue things back together. Not just glue them, but for them to become one again. In our relationship, wherever we are, whether it's in nature or with people, that would be the perspective of a bodhisattva. To entertain this gluing of fragments, to have oneness, no matter what falls apart. And keeping that relaxed state where it promotes the situation, the activity to be, while it's challenged and we have to live the truth in order for the fragments to come back together, it's a safe zone. Nobody is going to take advantage of a person turning around to say, I want to get back into being whole. I'm going to put my fragment aside and put the priority of that down. That would be my ego. I don't feel the challenge any longer of the ego needing to defend itself. I'm going to get back into the water and swim and let go of what I hold on to because there's such a drive to want to. That environment that a bodhisattva brings to what's taking place has a wallow or a well to it that is so attractive to be able to wiggle your toes in, just like a baby. The purity of the environment, and there's no bad outcome in it.